Welcome to another episode of Chax Chat. Join Chad Chelius and me, Dax Castro, where each week we wax poetic about document accessibility topics, tips, and the struggle of remediation and compliance. So sit back, grab your favorite mug of whatever, and let's get started.
Welcome, everyone. Today's podcast is sponsored by Creative Pro Week. The Creative Pro Week conference is in Washington, D.C. this year and is on July 8th through the 12th. It's an amazing conference for design professionals, and this year also includes some accessibility sessions that Dax and I will be presenting. My name is Chad Chelius. I'm an Adobe certified instructor, as well as training director and accessibility wizard at Chax Training and Consulting.
And my name is Dax Castro. I'm Director of Media Productions here at Chax Training Consulting, and Chad and I are both certified as accessible document specialists. And if you'd like your certification, head on over to accessibilityassociation.org/certifications and get more information about that. How you doing, Chad?
Good, man. How are you doing?
Not too bad, not too bad. Another sunny day. California is nice that way. Our garden is going great. We've already got zucchinis that are about a couple inches long already. And although my alpaca busted through the fence again, they actually busted the turnbuckle this time, that the collar that hooks onto the metal pole. And so they busted the gate open by shoving their body against it until it broke. And they went in and ate all my beets. They ate all the beet tops off of all my beets. And here's the thing. Beets are poisonous in large quantities to alpaca, and they have a high quantity of iron or something they're not supposed to have. And the last time they came in, they ate a few, and we were like, uh-oh, we looked it up, and they're like, they could kill them. Nothing happened. This time they ate them all. Nothing's happened. It's been a day or two. And so,
but not the beets themselves, just the tops, you mean?
Yeah, just the tops. So I don't know. So we'll see. But anyway, so mad. So this time I drilled another hole in the collar part and was able to lock that down. So now they'd have to literally bust through the gate, or it's a metal gate. They'd have to bust through it to get in there. So they're not getting in anymore. But man, that pissed me off. I was so mad. Yeah.
Well, I hope you gave them a strong talking to.
They would spit in my face if I tried to give them a strong talking to. So
well, the only thing I have in my garden right now is spinach and garlic. Right. That's all I've been able, but I planted the garlic back in October.
Dude, I am so jealous of your garlic. I wish every time I try garlic, it never does well. So, yeah.
Oh my God. It's probably too warm where you are, right? Because I think one of the keys to successful garlic is that it winters. Yeah. It winters over the winter. So as I said, I planted it in October. So we've had snow, we've had all this stuff. But now, man, it is really growing. It is now that the sun, it's warming up, it's really popping. So good stuff.
Well, I think what I'd love to talk about, Chad, is talking about designing with accessibility in mind, right? I'd really love to be able to talk about some design considerations for things like trifold brochures or QR codes and things where you might have to really specifically change how you might typically build your file so that those things can be exported easily, like a trifold brochure, right? Normally, how do we design a trifold brochure?
Well, depending on the designer, right? But a lot of times the designer will design it as a spread. Right. So you can do it a couple of ways in Adobe InDesign, but like one way you could just do a single 11 by 8.5 page with 3 panels within it, or you could build each panel as a page. But even when you do that, you often will just kind of stack them right next to each other as a spread. Right. So either way. So like trifolds are kind of tricky because the question becomes, well, how is a person going to read this? Right. It's like when you first get the trifold brochure, you see the cover.
Right.
And then you open it up and you see the inside front cover. And then you open up the other panel and now you see 3 spreads in a row. And that internal spread is typically pretty logical, pretty much falls in logical sequence. The outside spread, though, is going to go panel, back cover, front cover, right? And so if you have it read from, top down, left to right, it's not going to make any sense, right? And that's where the challenge, that's where we face a bit of a challenge, right? And I think that's where you're talking, Dax, designing with accessibility in mind, talking about how is the user going to consume this content and what's the best way for them to consume the content. I know I personally, looking at a trifold brochure digitally, just as a whole, is not a great experience.
Right.
Because you have to like, you're like, okay, what am I seeing here? It's the right panel, it's the back cover. It doesn't make any sense. And so when I typically do a trifold brochure, I like to output the PDF as single pages.
Right. And what do you mean by single pages? You're talking about just that front panel, that four, whatever that width
is. At the panel level. Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly. And so for that reason, Dax, like where some designers will take the approach that they'll create a 11 by 8.5 page and put 3 panels on that page. If you do that, there's no easy way to output single pages.
Right.
But if you build each panel as a page, even if you assemble it as spreads in InDesign, you can export the PDF as single pages and get each page as a panel.
Right. Just because you're making each page as a panel doesn't mean that you can't export that document correctly for both print and web, right? And you should be able to gang those spreads together and say these pages equal one spread and these pages equal one spread for your print application. But when you go to make it PDF, you take that feature, you unselect that spreads feature, and now you get individual panels. And now you can just, if you choose your view display inside Acrobat as cover, 2-up cover page, then the cover page will come out as as page 1 on its own. Then you have 2 panels that will come up together as your second page. And then, am I missing a panel here? I think I am missing a panel. If we do that, that would be incorrect. We have the front cover, then we'd have the inside first panel and the outside of the back cover, right, Chad? Is that right?
I think so.
And then you open up that one, and now you're going to have the center panel of the inside and the right panel of the inside as your second set. So you have front cover, inside panel 1, outside panel 3, and then you have inside panel 2, inside panel 3, and then back cover, which is basically outside panel 2. And so, wow, that takes a lot to think about. But the idea here, guys, that we want to just get across is that when you're doing this, it'll make much more sense. But you want to design those panels in individual pages so that you can set the reading order, use the articles panel to set your object order so that you can get things to output in the correct, most meaningful sequence, right? 1.3.2, the WCAG accessibility guideline says that if order matters, that they must be presented in the correct reading order. And that's why doing a trifold brochure is important to have that reading order correct. If you don't, and you just export as inside or outside spread and inside spread, then as someone's using assistive technology, navigating from one object to another, they're going to zip back and forth between page 1 and page 2 and page 1 and page 2 over and over again, which makes a really terrible user experience. And for someone who might have seizure disorders or they might have cognitive disability, then that can even add to the confusion of what's going on in the document. So definitely design those things with accessibility in mind. Another one, Chad, is a QR code. Now, we often use a phone to shoot a QR code, right? It's on a brochure. We want to give them a link to a video or more information, and we hope that they use their phone to then go off and do that. Now, if I'm reading this PDF on my phone, I need to be able to click on it or activate it, right? And so what I've seen more and more is instead of just using the QR code, they use the implicit web address underneath it or above it. And so it'll say, read more, find out more, watch the video, and then it will have the URL, and then it will have the QR code as well. So one of the things to think about is if I've got the URL as a clickable item, the QR code becomes an artifact. because it doesn't need to be active. If I'm using my phone to shoot it, I don't need to have it be a clickable hyperlink. If you have the regular text there, the hyperlink text to accessibilityunraveled.com, I can click on that. So when you're setting your reading order, just put your text, click here or whatever to read more about, our product, and then the web address right after it. The QR code can be wherever it wants to be because it's an artifact, whether it's between the two pieces of text or below the two pieces of text or above it or even off to the right. It really, really doesn't matter. I think people get hung up on how do I make a QR code accessible when a lot of times you really don't need to if you use that other URL, right?
Well, yeah, and we talked about this previously on the podcast, right? Because in your example, in addition to the QR code, they also put the URL.
Right.
And I'm a huge advocate of that. I think that's a great approach because it gives you, it avoids the need to make the QR code accessible, right?
Right.
But a lot of times I see where they just use a QR code and they don't provide a hyperlink as an alternative way of getting to where that QR code goes. And so in that situation, you may need to make the QR code accessible, right? And you can do it in Adobe InDesign, right? So if you click on the QR code with your selection tool, you could go to the hyperlinks panel, create a new hyperlink, type in the URL and click OK. And now the entire QR code is going to have that dashed border around it, indicating that it's a hyperlink, right? And that is accessible. It does work. You probably so from a compliance standpoint, you're probably going to get an error on that link. When you check it, it's going to say inappropriate use of a link structure element. And that's because that link is going to be at the root level of your tag structure.
Right.
And by default, it's expecting the link to be nested inside of something.
Sure.
And so to solve that problem, you just have to change that link to be a block level element, and then that error is going to go away. Right.
Typically what I do is I know that the QR code will always be inside a section tag, right? If it's in its own, if you created a text box and you put the QR code in it, it gets stuck in a section, right? I mean, that's just the way InDesign works, right? If I just change a section to a P tag, I've solved it.
Yeah.
And I don't have to, then I don't have to worry about changing block level to place, the placement to block or inline. The P tag makes it work okay. So either solution is completely correct. So, but some other ones, Chad, I think the, talking about captions, I think that's another one where we don't always design our document thinking about how am I going to make my captions accessible. Now, there's a couple of different ways. I'll talk about the first way and you can talk about your way of modifying the styles. But one thing to note is that if you have a caption and you've decided, okay, in this document, my caption is going to be my alt text, you need to make sure that your caption starts with the word photo or image or graphic or something, because you're going to artifact the actual image and the caption is just going to be the only thing that stands alone to tell the user, hey, there was an image here. Because if you just, I see this a lot of times where if you just have the caption as italic text in a certain style under the photo, there's nothing telling the user that that's a caption, that it's for a photo. And if you decide, okay, well, I'm just going to artifact all my images because the captions really are the alt text, there's nothing to tell the user it's alt text. So now you've got to go back to each one of those captions and write above or photo or, graphic or something, usually it's whatever it is, colon, and then your description. So just be thinking about that as you create, if you've decided that my caption is going to be my alt text, and then I can artifact the image. But remember, a caption is a description of the image, not a bunch of other anecdotal information. So if your caption says, John and Mary saved more than $50,000 this year to buy the brand new car, and that's your caption, but the photo is John and Mary standing next to their brand new Corvette, that's not the same thing. So remember that caption is fine, but the alt text needs to be applied to that photo. So just remember that there are a difference. Now, for captions, to tag a caption as a caption and not necessarily as the alt text for the image, you've got a great solution, right, Chad?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of ways that you can approach this. I mean, the way that I typically do this is I will name my style caption with a capital C. So I'm basically naming the style what I want the tag to be named as, right? And InDesign doesn't have the ability to map a style to a caption. So when you make the style the name of the tag that you want, what ends up happening is it creates a role map. And a lot of us are familiar with the role map where we're going to have an entry in there that says caption. And as long as you don't change what it's mapped to, it's going to say caption mapped to a P.
Which is paragraph tag, right?
Which is paragraph. Yeah. And so if you apply that to all of your captions, what you could do is after the PDF is created, go into the role map and delete that role map entry of caption P. And what's going to happen is the tag is going to change to be caption. And everywhere you used it, it's actually going to be tagged correctly as a caption. So it's kind of a workaround. It's kind of a way of like achieving the end result that you're going for in a fairly intuitive way. The other way you could do it is if you use made to tag. Made to tag actually allows you to map a style to a caption tag. So those are two ways you can approach that. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the role map for a minute, because maybe not everybody's familiar with what the role map is. So there are a list of standard tags. They're accepted tags for PDFs, and those are a series of tags that now in InDesign, the amount of tags that we can actually map something to, very small. Heading 1 through 6, artifact, and that's it. Yeah, paragraph and paragraph tag. So if you are using, let's say, heading level 2, 14-point bold blue as your style name, well, it's a heading level 2 is the intention, but then you've named it something else for convenience because you want to be able to identify what it is. InDesign uses a lookup table that says, okay, you called it this, but I'm calling it only one of these 6 tags that we have available to us. And in that case, it would be a heading level 2, right? So if you're, H2 blue bold in your style name, you can choose to export tag it as a heading level 2, right? And so that map, that lookup table gets saved to the PDF so that when you're an Acrobat and you look at your tags, or assistive technology looks at your tags, it doesn't see H2 bold blue. It just sees H2, H3, paragraph, right? But what it doesn't have, like Chad said, is the ability to map to a caption tag or a label or a L body or a TOC or TOCI, a lot of other tags. They're not, the ability to export tag them in InDesign is not there. At least we don't have access to it. So this lookup table will map those things from whatever we called it to whatever the standard tag is. And that's what Chad's talking about when he talks about looking at the role map. We can go into that role map and let's just say that we noticed that they forgot to set the export tagging for their H4. They called the H4 underscore H4 at 12 point. And everywhere in my document, all those styles were mapped to paragraph. And we look in the role map and we can see that underscore H4 is mapped to a P tag because they forgot to set the export tag. In the role map, we can just click on that P and change it to an H4. And when we hit save and we go back to our tag tree, all those uses of all those H4s in my tag tree will now say H4. And that's exactly the same process as Chad's talking about. When we purposely call something caption in InDesign, we know we can go into the role map afterward and just delete that entry and say, nope, I called it what I want it to be called, and it is a standard tag. So go ahead and leave it. And it's a great way to use the shortcomings of InDesign as a benefit, right?
Yep. And that also, by the way, works for block quote, right? So like if you're, if your document is kind of riddled with pull quotes, right? You could use the block, create a style called block quote, capital B, capital Q, and then you could do the same technique, Although, I mean, the value of that is questionable because it's not voiced as a block quote. It doesn't actually announce it as such. So, the value is questionable, but it's tagged correctly.
Well, I think I put it in line with those people who use an N dash or an M dash instead of just a hyphen. They're like the people who are really specific about whether you use one versus the other. I'm like, I don't care. I'm just going to hit dash. Right. And so
I'm very particular. Chad. I am very particular about that. Yeah.
I could see it in your eyes. For those of you who are just listening, Chad was like, you what? Don't say that out loud. You pull those words right back in your mouth right now, damn it.
That reminds me, have you ever seen the show? It's in California. Where the tech that they're all
tech support people. Yeah.
No. Oh, it's gonna bother me. But the guy's dating this girl and they're both programmers.
Mm-hmm.
And he finds out that she uses spaces instead of tabs, and he breaks up with her.
Oh no.
It was so funny.
Well, anyway, it's like that commercial that's on TV right now. That's like the guy and the girl are on a date at his house. He's cooking dinner, and she opens the refrigerator, and she's like, "Oh, what's this?" And he goes, "It's dog food." Or she goes, "Is this dog food in your refrigerator?" He's like, "No, it's whatever the brand name of the dog food."
Yeah.
She goes, "It's dog food." And the next thing you see is the door closing and she's going home.
I know.
Right?
I know.
Yeah. No.
The show is called Silicon Valley.
Yes.
That was the show I was thinking about.
I actually just found, if you look up tab versus space on YouTube, you actually can find a copy of that. I just looked it up, but yeah.
Really good.
Awesome. All right. What else? I mean, so some TOC is another one, right? Where you don't think about designing your document around a table of contents, but you really should. Table of contents is a structured, organized list of the headings in your document. And when you just start making headings willy-nilly and you're not following a pattern, and then it comes time to create your table of contents, you're like, well, I don't like how this automatic table of contents came out. It took this heading I don't want, and this one I don't want, and this one I don't want. I'm like, that is not a symptom of the table of contents. That's a symptom of your design and not following a specific structure in the document.
Well, I will tell you, I literally just worked on a document like this yesterday, and I went into their document and I could see that they used the table of contents feature, but when I updated it, it went bananas. Right. Like nothing at all was correct. It was all like, and when I started looking in the file, they had like 4 pages of text, body copy, tagged as headings.
Sure.
And I was like, I don't even know how this happened, right? Like, if you said, Chad, I want every one of these paragraphs to be a heading, but look like body copy, I wouldn't know how to do it, right? I don't even know how you would approach that. So I had to go in and readjust it. But you're right, Dax. I mean, the table of contents feature is such a powerful feature, mainly because when you use the table of contents feature in Adobe InDesign, every entry of that table of contents becomes a clickable link as well as a navigable link for users of assistive technology.
Yep.
So the WCAG success criteria, and I'm drawing a blank.
Are you doing multiple
ways? Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
4.1,
multiple ways is what I was thinking.
Yeah.
That's a great example of meeting that success criteria, because you're offering the user multiple ways of navigating the document. If they want to use bookmarks, they can use bookmarks. If they want to use heading structure, they can use heading structure. If they want to use a table of contents, they have that method as well. And by using the table of contents feature, it just happens. You don't have to do anything. It's brilliant, So I'm a huge advocate.
What we find out, though, is that a lot of people are moving away from table of contents into these and I'm going to say it, these stupid nav bars at the tops of your PDFs. And if you're one of those organizations doing this, can you please stop? It's not a web page. If you want a web page, go make a web page. But putting a nav bar at the top of your documents, literally just had one the other day, and they're like, well, this is the way we designed the document. I'm like, yeah, this is going to cost you an extra $250 because I have to manually go into all 75 pages and make it accessible, these individual nav bars. Because what they did, they put the nav bar on the parent page. And then because they wanted to appear on every page, and it just creates a nightmare.
Well, and Dax, doesn't this come back to designing with accessibility in mind, right?
It's the whole part of this podcast.
I truly question, like, what is the true value of that nav bar, right? I mean, I don't know that I've ever used one. Even though it's there, I don't know that I've ever used one, because there are so many other ways for me to get to where I want to go in that document versus using the nav bar. And the nav bar is only going to take me to that section. It's not going to take me to really where I'm trying to go.
Right. And that's what people don't understand is that, let's say that the nav bar says go to page 7, but the heading that is for that section is 3 paragraphs down from on page 7. It doesn't go right to that thing. That's a destination, and that can be set in InDesign, but it's not set by the nav bar. So it's a whole different type of thing. Usually what people want is what we call breadcrumbs. They just want you to know where you are in the scheme of this document. Now, if I've got 7 chapters and I want you to know all of these pages in this one section are for chapter 5, I have the little breadcrumb. I have number 5 highlighted in red so you can see that it's still chapter 5. That's fine. But it doesn't need to be clickable. It can stay on the parent page. It can then be hidden by assistive technology, and I can just keep going. And I don't have to be interrupted by chapter 5. Yep, still in chapter 5. Nope, still in chapter 5 as I go through each one of those pages. So go listen to our podcast on navigation bars in PDFs. We've covered it many times. We'll link in the show notes to a couple of the different podcasts where we've talked about it, but definitely not a good user experience. So you know, to sum up our podcast today, really, it is about thinking differently when you are designing documents, knowing that the content needs to be readable by everyone. And when you make a few design changes in the beginning, or consider a few things in the beginning, as you develop your document, you get to the end and you go, great, it's all good to go. I can make a few changes and export to PDF, maybe massage a few things. But so many times, Chad, we hear people say, accessibility is so hard. This is terrible. I don't understand. And what you find out almost 9 out of 10 times is because they didn't think about designing their document with accessibility in mind. They figured it's something they could do at the end. And then they find out there's all these things they've got to change.
Well, and then it is hard. Yeah. Right. I mean, then I would agree with you. Yes. At that point, accessibility is hard, but when you incorporate it throughout the process, it is really not hard, right? I mean, it takes a mindset shift. I will say that, right? Like, as a designer, it took a little bit of time before I started incorporating accessibility into my design as I'm building it. But once you achieve that, boy, does it get easy. I mean, it is not this behemoth that you need to overcome. It's just part of the normal process.
Chad, I just thought of another analogy. I'm the king of analogies, self-proclaimed, right? So imagine you're building a car, and the mechanics by trade are colorblind. And you built your car with red, green, blue, white, brown, orange wires. And now the car is built. And the mechanic says, hey, I can't work on this car because I'm colorblind. I need to know between the red and the green wires, and there's no way for me. Imagine the level of effort it would take to go into every wire in that car and change the green ones to a blue one, or a green one with a white stripe, or something, different. That it would be an immense effort. And we have seen documents like that, where they're like, we've used drop caps on every single paragraph. Here's another, we'll close out with this one. Drop caps. Do not use drop caps in your document unless you are prepared to go into the PDF and fix every single one of them, because no design program today will export a drop cap correctly. It will separate the letter. If it's a D for drop, it'll say D drop. It will not say drop. And so you've got to go back and mechanically stitch those things back together. It's those kinds of things. When you consider those things, it's a small change to go from no drop cap to, or from a drop cap to no drop cap, or ligatures to no ligatures. And you get a much easier process at the end. So if you take anything away from this podcast today, it's consider accessibility. The earlier you consider accessibility, the easier your job is going to be at the end. So,
yep. And we've said that many, many times, right? If you take anything away from this podcast, take that, right? Just think about it early on. I mean, color contrast is another great one that I always say, do it at the beginning. Because that's when it's super easy to fix, right? If you wait until the PDF is created and start evaluating color contrast, ouch. Like that, then it gets really hard. It gets really hard. Awesome. Well, listen, guys, I want to thank you all for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed our discussion and learned a few things about designing with accessibility in mind. Once again, we want to thank Creative Pro Week for being our sponsor on today's podcast. Creative Pro Week Conference is in DC, Washington, DC this year, and it's on July 8th through the 12th. Amazing conference. Check it out at creativeproweek.com.
And we're going to have some sticker packs. Sorry, Chad. We're going to have some sticker packs to go with that, right? So we have our sheet of stickers that we've made for this year that have some really cool accessibility stickers on them. So if you catch us at Creative Pro Week, we will give you a whole sheet of accessibility.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. My name is Chad Chelius.
And my name is Chax Castro, where each week we unravel accessibility for you.
Thanks, guys.